Most Canadian retirees are making a six-figure mistake with one of the most powerful accounts they own, and they do not even realize it. If you have a tax-free savings account and you are in retirement or approaching it, what you are about to hear could change the entire financial outcome for you and the people you love. This is not about contributing your annual $7,000 and forgetting it exists. This is about a strategy that turns a modest TFSA into a tax-free estate worth well over $1 million. And it works for regular Canadians, not just the wealthy. Stay with me, because the next few minutes could be worth more to your retirement than any single financial decision you have made in years. The way most retirees use their TFSA is costing them dearly. Here is a picture that will be immediately familiar to most people watching this. You have spent your working years building up your RRSP. You have been disciplined. You have contributed regularly, watched it grow, and now you are in retirement or getting close to it. You have also been putting money into your TFSA when you could, and you might have somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 sitting in there right now. But here is what almost every Canadian retiree does with that TFSA. They treat it like a plant sitting in the corner of the room. They water it once a year, usually in February, right before the tax filing deadline. They check how much contribution room they have, deposit the annual amount, $7,000 or whatever their available room allows, and then they do not think about it again for another 12 months. Because there are other priorities. The RRSP needs attention. The RRIF withdrawals need to be planned. There might be a pension, some rental income, CPP, and OAS timing decisions to work through. The TFSA gets pushed to the back. This pattern is understandable. But it is also one of the most expensive habits a Canadian retiree can have, because the TFSA is not just a savings account you contribute to and ignore. Used correctly, it is the most powerful wealth building and wealth transfer tool available to Canadian retirees, and most people are not using it that way. Why the TFSA is your best account, and why that is exactly the problem. Part of the reason the TFSA gets neglected in retirement is that people know it is their best account. And because they know it is their best account, they are reluctant to touch it. They think of it as a last resort, something to be preserved and protected. And in one sense, that instinct is correct. You should be protecting your TFSA. But the reason you protect it matters enormously, because the reason shapes the strategy. Most retirees protect their TFSA because they think of it as emergency money, a buffer, a safety net for unexpected expenses. That framing leads to a passive approach. You contribute, you invest conservatively, and you wait. The reframe that changes everything is this. Stop thinking of your TFSA as a retirement income account. Start thinking of it as an estate account. That single shift in perspective transforms how you invest inside it, how aggressively you grow it, and how strategically you use it in coordination with your RRSP and RRIF. Everything changes when you understand what your TFSA is actually for. The tax problem hiding inside your RRSP and RRIF. To understand why the TFSA estate strategy works, you need to understand the tax problem sitting inside your RRSP and your RRIF. Every single dollar in those accounts is fully taxable when it comes out. Every dollar. That is the deal you made when you contributed. You got the tax deduction on the way in, and the government collects on the way out. For most retirees, that means their RRSP and RRIF withdrawals are added to their taxable income each year, affecting their tax bracket, potentially triggering OAS clawbacks, and creating a tax bill that compounds over time. But the situation becomes genuinely serious when you look at what happens at the end of life. If you pass away with money remaining in your RRSP or RRIF, and particularly if you are the last surviving spouse in a couple, the CRA treats the entire remaining balance as income in the year of death. That means your estate could face a tax hit of 40% to 50% on whatever is left in those accounts. If you have $400,000 remaining in your RRIF when you pass, your estate could lose $160,000 to $200,000 of that to taxes. That is not what you intended when you spent decades building that account. That is not the legacy you had in mind. Your TFSA operates under completely different rules. Every dollar in your TFSA goes directly to your named beneficiaries, completely tax-free. There is no income inclusion, no clawback, no complication. The money transfers exactly as it is, in full, to the people you choose. That is why the TFSA is not just your best account for retirement. It is your most powerful tool for passing wealth to the next generation. The RRSP meltdown strategy and how it feeds your TFSA. Now here is where the actual strategy comes together. The approach that transforms a $230,000 TFSA into a $2 million estate account over a retirement lifetime is built on a coordinated withdrawal plan called the RRSP meltdown, and the TFSA is where the proceeds go. Consider a realistic example. A couple in their early 60s decides to retire. Each of them has a significant RRSP balance, not an extreme amount, a realistic one. One partner has approximately $600,000 in their RRSP. They have about $230,000 combined in their TFSA and a smaller amount in a non-registered account. They make a deliberate decision to defer both CPP and old age security to age 70, which allows them to make strategic withdrawals from their RRSP in the years before those government benefits begin. In the first year, they withdraw $30,000 from the RRSP. They do not need all of that money for living expenses, so $7,000 of it goes directly into the TFSA as that year's contribution. The following year, they withdraw $35,000 from what has now become a RRIF. The minimum RRIF withdrawal at that point is approximately $20,000, so there is withholding tax on the additional amount, but the planning accounts for that. Again, $7,000 flows into the TFSA. This pattern continues year after year. The RRSP and RRIF withdrawals are calibrated to keep the effective tax rate low. In this example, consistently around 15% to 16% throughout retirement, which is a remarkably efficient tax outcome. The money not needed for living expenses waterfalls into the TFSA year after year, building steadily. How the annual TFSA contribution limit grows over time. One factor that accelerates this strategy over a long retirement is that the annual TFSA contribution limit itself increases over time. The government adjusts the limit upward, rounded to the nearest $500, roughly every 2 to 3 years as inflation moves it. In 2025, the annual limit was $7,000. By 2028, it is projected to increase to $7,500. A few years after that, it reaches $8,000, then continues climbing. Further into retirement, the annual contribution amount available will reach $10,500 and beyond. This means that over a 25 to 30-year retirement, the annual amount flowing into the TFSA from RRSP and RRIF withdrawals is not fixed. It grows. And because it grows inside an account that compounds without any tax drag, the effect is dramatic. By the end of the retirement plan in this example, the TFSA that started at $237,000 has grown to $2.3 million. Not because of speculative investments or unusual returns, but because of consistent contributions, compound growth inside a tax-free environment, and a disciplined withdrawal strategy that prioritized other accounts first. That is the power of treating your TFSA as an estate account rather than a retirement income account. The investment strategy inside your TFSA must match the goal. If your TFSA is an estate account, money you intend to leave to your beneficiaries rather than spend in retirement, then the way you invest inside it should reflect that. And for most retirees who have this conversation honestly with themselves, the investment approach they are currently using inside their TFSA is far too conservative. There is a common mistake embedded in the very name of the account: tax-free savings account. The word savings leads people to put their TFSA money into high-interest savings deposits, GICs, or other low-yield instruments. That is a costly error. High-interest savings accounts inside a TFSA are not growing your wealth. They are preserving it at a rate that barely keeps pace with inflation, and sometimes does not even manage that. If you are not planning to use your TFSA for income in retirement, and for many Canadians with a substantial RRSP, a pension, CPP, and OAS, you genuinely may never need to touch it. Then you should be investing it for growth. Stocks, equity ETFs, broad market index funds, or other growth-oriented instruments are appropriate inside a TFSA when the account is being managed as an estate vehicle with a multi-decade time horizon. The S&P 500 has historically returned 9% to 10% annually over long periods. A well-constructed Canadian equity or balanced equity portfolio has returned in a similar range over time. In the planning example described earlier, the RRSP is modeled at a 7% return, reasonable for an account that may need to be accessed regularly and where some capital preservation is appropriate. The TFSA, however, is modeled at 8%, reflecting the fact that it is being grown for the long term with no planned withdrawals. That 1% difference in return, compounded over 25 to 30 years inside a tax-free account, is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. In some cases, it is the difference between leaving your beneficiaries $1 million and leaving them $2 million. This does not mean speculating. It does not mean chasing high-risk investments. It means aligning your investment approach inside the TFSA with the actual purpose of the account: long-term tax-free growth for eventual tax-free transfer. When it does make sense to use your TFSA in retirement. This strategy is not a rigid rule that you never touch your TFSA under any circumstances. Life is not that simple, and neither is retirement planning. There are specific situations where drawing on your TFSA during retirement is not only acceptable, but actually the smart financial move. The first is avoiding a higher tax bracket in a particular year. If you have an unusually large expense, a major home repair, a vehicle replacement, a significant travel expense, a family event, you need additional cash. Rather than increasing your RRF withdrawal to cover that expense, which would push more income into a higher tax bracket, you can draw from your TFSA instead. The TFSA withdrawal does not count as income. It does not affect your tax bracket. It does not trigger OAS clawback. You get the cash you need, and your tax situation for that year remains clean. And because TFSA withdrawals create recontribution room that is added back the following January 1st, you can replenish what you took out once the expense has passed. The second situation is managing the OAS clawback threshold. If your RRIF withdrawals are aggressive, which they need to be to execute a proper RRSP meltdown strategy, you may find your net income approaching the OAS recovery threshold. For 2026, OAS clawback begins at $93,454 of net world income. If your RRIF withdrawals are pushing you toward that line, you have two choices. You can reduce the RRIF withdrawal, which slows the meltdown strategy, or you can maintain the RRIF withdrawal at its planned level, reduce it slightly, and supplement your income with a tax-free TFSA withdrawal that does not add to your net income. The second approach often produces a better long-term outcome for your overall financial plan. The third situation is simply large one-time expenses: a bucket list trip, a significant gift to an adult child, helping a grandchild with education costs. In any of these cases, the TFSA is the right account to draw from because doing so generates no tax, no clawback, and no complications. You do not need a specific justification. If you need the money and the TFSA is the cleanest source, use it thoughtfully and replenish it when possible. The core principle is intentionality. Every decision about your TFSA, whether to contribute more, to invest more aggressively, to withdraw strategically, or to leave it untouched for years, should be a conscious choice made within a broader retirement income plan. It should never be an accident, and it should never be driven by habit or inertia. The withdrawal sequence that protects your wealth. The overall withdrawal strategy that supports this approach follows a clear sequence. Draw from your RRSP and RRIF first, managing your withdrawals carefully to keep your effective tax rate in the most efficient range possible, generally around 15% to 20% for most middle-income Canadian retirees. Use your non-registered account as a supplementary source to fill gaps in years with unusual spending, since withdrawals from non-registered accounts may involve capital gains but are generally more tax efficient than large RRIF spikes. Leave your TFSA for last. Let it grow untouched as long as your other accounts can support your income needs. This sequencing accomplishes several things simultaneously. It depletes the most heavily taxed accounts first, reducing the potential estate tax hit on those accounts at end of life. It allows the TFSA to compound without interruption over the longest possible period. It keeps annual taxable income in a predictable range that avoids bracket spikes and OAS clawback, and it maximizes the tax-free value transferred to beneficiaries at the end of the plan. the non-registered account's role in this strategy. Many retirees underestimate the role their non-registered account plays in making this entire strategy work. The non-registered account serves as a buffer, a flexible, accessible pool of capital that absorbs unusual expenses without disrupting either the RRIF meltdown schedule or the TFSA accumulation plan. In years where spending is moderate and the RRIF withdrawal generates more cash than needed, that surplus can flow into the TFSA as the annual contribution. In years where spending spikes due to a large one-time expense, the non-registered account absorbs the difference rather than forcing either an increased RRF withdrawal or a TFSA drawdown. This flexibility is what allows the TFSA to keep growing consistently year after year without being rated for short-term needs. Over time, as the RRIF is depleted through the meltdown strategy and as spending naturally decreases in later retirement, less travel, less activity, lower food and entertainment costs, the non-registered account and the RRIF combine to generate more surplus than is needed. That surplus continues to flow into the TFSA, accelerating the growth of the estate account in the final years of the plan. What this strategy means for the people you leave behind. The ultimate outcome of this approach is not just a larger TFSA balance for yourself, it is a fundamentally different financial legacy for your beneficiaries. When you pass, every dollar in your RRIF is taxable income to your estate. Every dollar in your non-registered account may be subject to capital gains, but every dollar in your TFSA transfers to your named beneficiaries completely tax-free. No income inclusion, no CRA involvement, no reduction. For a couple who has executed this strategy consistently throughout a 25 to 30-year retirement, the TFSA that started at $230,000 does not leave their beneficiaries $300,000 or $400,000 after decades of modest contributions. It leaves them $1 million, $1.5 million, or as shown in realistic planning projections, over $2 million entirely free of tax. That is the compounding effect of consistent contributions, tax-free growth at an appropriate rate of return, and a withdrawal strategy that protects the account through an entire retirement lifetime. The 3 questions worth asking yourself today. If you are in retirement or approaching it, 3 questions are worth sitting with after everything covered here. First, is your TFSA invested appropriately for its actual purpose? If you are holding it in a high-interest savings account or conservative GICs while managing it as an estate account you never plan to touch, your rate of return is almost certainly too low. Review your investment mix inside the account and consider whether it reflects a long-term growth objective. Second, does your withdrawal strategy sequence your accounts in the right order? If you are drawing heavily from your TFSA while your RRSP or RRIF sits relatively untouched, you may be creating a larger tax problem at the end of your plan than you realize. A coordinated meltdown strategy that draws down RRSP and RRIF first, feeds the TFSA annually, and reserves TFSA withdrawals for strategic situations is worth reviewing with a financial planner who understands the interplay between all of these accounts. Third, have you named beneficiaries directly on your TFSA? This is the step that ensures the tax-free transfer actually happens cleanly. If your TFSA flows through your estate rather than directly to a named beneficiary, there can be delays, legal complications, and in some cases, tax implications that erode the value. Name your beneficiaries directly on the account. Review those designations regularly, especially following major life events such as marriage, divorce, or the death of a spouse. These are not complicated steps. They do not require advanced financial knowledge. They require attention and a willingness to shift your thinking about what the TFSA is really for. And the financial reward for making that shift, measured over a full retirement lifetime, is genuinely significant. If you have questions about how this strategy applies to your specific situation, write them in the comments below. Every comment is read and responses are given. Whether you are unsure how to begin a RRIF meltdown, whether you are trying to figure out the right investment approach inside your TFSA, or whether you want to understand how CPP and OAS timing interacts with all of this, bring your questions. You will find that others in exactly the same situation are asking the same things, and the conversation helps everyone. If someone you know is heading into retirement or already there and still treating their TFSA like a savings account they rarely think about, please share this with them. The difference between a passive TFSA strategy and an intentional estate strategy over the course of a full retirement is not marginal. It is the difference between leaving $300,000 and leaving $2 million tax-free to the people who matter most to you. Subscribe if you want to keep receiving clear, practical, and accurate information about retirement planning in Canada. These strategies evolve, tax rules change, and new planning opportunities emerge throughout the year. When they do, you deserve to hear about them in plain language with real numbers that apply to your actual life. Retirement Rights Canada.